Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Medical Research with Mohan. The topic for today's discussion is embryology of research. These are my learning objectives. First, as usual, is I will help you understand the concept rather than memorizing the definition. And topic specific learning objective is learning the steps of research from conceiving an idea to publication. Let's describe the research process. Health research, no matter how small, is a highly complex activity, and navigation of research through different stages of maturity is called research cycle or research process, which is analogous to development of a zygote into embryo and ultimately. This is a pictorial example of how a baby is born. A baby goes through several stages of development, beginning as a fertilized egg. Then the egg develops into a zygote, then morula, blastocyst, embryo, and finally is born as a baby. Similarly, the research cycle also follows similar pattern. First, you identify the research problem, then review the literature, set questions, objective and hypothesis, choose appropriate research design, then you collect data, analyze data, and finally you report results. So let's talk about the fundamental principles of research process. Though every research is unique, the underlying principle is the same. Each stage is a direct precursor and the modifier of the subsequent stages. In every step, there are alternatives available, and as a good researcher, we should be aware of the alternatives. And this research process is very iterative and demands patience. Let's go one by one and start with identifying the problem. A well-identified problem will shape the subsequent phases of the research and is extremely important. However, the prerequisite of identifying the problem is the familiarity with the current literature. And there are many ways you can get identify the problem. The number one and most important one is the researcher's intellectual curiosity, followed by suggestions from peers, input from faculty, and suggestions from the public literature. Next step is the review of the literature. This review of the literature part overlaps with many other stages. However, it is described here. Review of the literature is a structured, comprehensive method that involves an objective and critical evaluation of the published work. The objective is to map the territory in the area of interest and understand the existing research and controversies relevant to the area of study. This helps to identify the knowledge gap. As I said earlier, the review of the literature starts well before the research problem is identified and continues till the end. Now, the third step in the research cycle is setting research questions, objective, and hypothesis. Regarding research question, one need to frame the problem scientifically using PICO model. P stands for population of interest, I for intervention, C for comparison, and O for outcome. One example is given here. Does regular health checkup of drivers compared to no such policy reduces the risk of RTS? This is one example of framing using PICO model. And another recommendation is when you make research question, you use finer criteria. F means feasible, I means interesting, N novel, E ethical, and R is relevant. We'll be discussing about this in detail in subsequent videos. Next is objective. Objectives should be formulated using SMART criteria. S means specific, M measurable, A achievable, R relevant, and time bound. Then the hypothesis. Hypothesis is defined as a statement of the nature of relationship between independent and dependent variables, normally expressed as null and alternate hypothesis. And descriptive studies do not require statement of hypothesis, as we do not use any inferential statistics there. Now, choosing research design is another important stage of the life cycle of a research project. It is an approach we should take to answer the research question, and the type of research design selected depends on the type of the problem and the resources available. In clinical situation, the common type of research designs are case series, cross-sectional, case control, and randomized control trial. Due to the long time making nature of the cohort study in clinical research, they are infrequently performed. After choosing the research design, typically a researcher makes a research proposal intended to be submitted to funding agencies or institutional review committee for approval. Next step is collecting the data. Data can be primary or secondary. Primary data is the data that the research team collects directly from the source, whereas secondary data is stored by some other agencies and you take permission from that agency and get those collected data. Collecting primary data is the most expensive step in any research. There are many ways you can collect primary data. For quantitative data, structured interviews or pro forma are commonly used, whereas for qualitative data, in-depth interviews and focused group discussions are utilized. For the secondary data, census, vital registration records, hospital charts are some examples. Now, next is processing and analyzing the data. Data unless analyze is useless. Data processing is translation of the raw data for useful information. The data is cleaned up and organized so that it is ready for analysis, which is applying appropriate statistical tools to derive useful information. Why you do this? It helps you to interpret the findings objectively by differentiating the signal, which is useful information, from noise. So one slide dedicated to why collection of good data is important. This is called DIKW pyramid. It is uncertain who originated this concept, but this is extremely popular. Data is a raw, unprocessed fact. Once we add context in the data, then it becomes information, which is organized and contextualized data. When we add meaning to the information, it becomes knowledge, which is a synthesis of multiple sources of information over time. It helps uncover patterns, trends, and relationships. And when we add insight to the knowledge, it becomes wisdom, which is your ability to make well-informed decisions. Each step up in the pyramid creates value based on the initial data, and it can be used to answer high-level question in a confident manner. So reporting result is the last step of your research cycle. The research report, if not shared with the relevant stakeholder, is useless. And please remember, no result is useless. Even if your p-value is not less than 0.05, still it gives useful information to the existing body of literature. There are many ways you can share your research result. Typically, postgraduate and doctoral students report the results in the form of thesis or dissertation, but the most scientific way of sharing the research result is by publishing in a peer-reviewed journal. There is still some controversy as to whether you should share the research result in social medias or news channel. Yes, you can, but it is essential to be mindful of the kind of information you share in social media, is there is a risk of information being distorted. This slide compares and contrasts the human fetal development versus development of a research project. In fetal development, looking for the right pattern is the first step, whereas in research, identifying the right problem to address is the first step. In fetal development, gathering the information about your prospective partner is equivalent to review of the literature in research. And third step is legally and morally allowable marriage in fetal development, whereas in research, before you start retrieving data or collecting data, you have to give institutional review board approval so that the research is done ethically. Fourth is then conception, equivalent of that in research is selection of the topic. Now you have committed yourself to that topic. And the fifth is providing nutrition, vaccine, and overall health optimization of the mother. so that the development, growth and development of the fetus is good inside the uterus. The equivalent is proper data collection, which includes avoiding data contamination, loss to follow-up, etc. So the end result of this human fetal development is birth of a healthy baby. uh, uh, the equivalent of that in research is publication of your research in a high impact peer-reviewed journal. To summarize today's video, the research process goes through often overlapping stages similar to fetal development. Meticulous planning and execution is required in each stage. Every step of the research process should be carefully considered and adjusted so that the whole project is completed smoothly. Thank you so much for being with me today. I hope the information provided here is useful to you. Hope to see you next time. Bye.